recording is processing. Okay. So
Thank you,
recording
thank
has
you, sir.
started. So I request our resource person to start the session. Thank you, sir.
Okay, sir. So at the outset, I welcome you all to my class, and my assignment is to teach you
Good evening, sir.
BEGC 102. Thank you. So my assignment is to teach you BEGC 102. So under this particular section, we have 5 topics to be covered. So the first one is the Homer's Iliad. The second one is Sophocles' Oedipus Rex. And the third one is Ovid's Metamorphosis. And next one, Horace's Satire. And then Plato's The Pot of Gold. So these are my assignments to be taught to you in course of time. So as per my assignment, so it is all about the today's class. It's Homer's the Iliad. It's all about Homer's the Iliad. So my dear learners, so as this particular section, this Homer's Iliad, it is particularly talks about the Greek literature. So before going to the topic directly, first we must have focus on literature and different forms. So you must have know what is literature. Then we talk about the different forms of literature. Literature is a vast tree. If we compare literature as a tree, so it has many branches. So those branches of that huge tree literature are known as different forms of literature. So like dramas, novels, short stories, essays, poetry. So these are the different forms of literature. And today we are going to deal with an important form of literature, that is poetry. So as literature has different forms, similarly a poetry has different forms. As you know that a poetry, it's just a rhythmical composition of thoughts. Poetry, it's the rhythmical composition of thoughts. And there are different forms of poetry like ode, ballad, sonnet, lyric, satire, and epic. So my intention is that why I am going to the not directly to the topic but introducing you from the literature to the topic. I am just taking you from literature to the topic. So from literature is here compared with a huge tree having many branches, and those branches are different forms of literature like drama, novel, short story, essay, poetry, etc. And if we focus on poetry, similarly, poetry has also different forms. There are different types of poems. If we consider those different forms of poetry, we find ode. Ode, it's a particular form of poem that is addressed to someone. Then ballad, it's a particular form of poetry that is based on folk tales. Then sonnet, it's a poem about 14 lines. Lyric, it's a poem on about a particular theme or subject matter that can be sung with the tune of music. And a satire, so you might have known what is satire. And its intention is always good in order to rectify the corrupt practices of the society. Satire always teaches us from evil to good. And finally, the most important form of poetry is epic. Epic, Mahakavya, epic. So we will focus on that particular form epic because the topic today we are going to discuss, it is none other than that important form topic, epic. So first I will tell you what is an epic. A epic, it's a long and a narrative poem, very descriptive poem in a serious subject. The subject matter is serious. The subject matter is not ordinary. It's very serious. The content is serious. It's a long and a narrative poem. And it is told in a formal and elevated style. formal and elevated style, dignified style, not in ordinary style. And it is centered on a heroic or semi-divine figure. It is centered on a heroic or a semi-divine figure on whose actions, that means whose actions means those divine figures actions depends the fate of a tribe or the fate of a nation or the fate of a civilization or the fate of a culture or the fate of a human race. This is how we define epic. It's a long poem, it's a narrative poem, it's a descriptive poem, and the subject matter is very much serious, and it is written in a formal and elevated style. If we focus on the languages of Ramayana, languages of Mahabharata, you will find that Bhratasri, Pitasri, Mamasri. So these are how the formal and elevated style of language, and centered on a heroic or a semi-divine figure. The central character is a heroic figure or a semi-divine figure, and whose actions depends the future of a tribe or the future of a nation or the future of a civilization or the future of a culture or even the future of a human race. And we are going to deal with that particular epic that is written by Greek poet Homer. It's the Iliad. So we are going to focus on that Iliad written by Greek poet Homer. So Iliad is none other than epic itself. Iliad is an epic. So now I will focus on the some important characteristics of epic. So what are the different characteristics of epic? So from the definition epic, you might have known about some important characters of epic. So the first one is the central character or the protagonist or the hero is a figure of great national or cosmic importance. The hero belongs to a community that is of a great national or cosmic importance. So if we take the example of Milton's Paradise Lost, so there are many epics. So I will focus on the examples of different epics. If we take the example of Milton's Paradise Lost, we will find that Adam is the central character. Adam is the hero of that epic. And Adam is not only a human being, it is both God and man. So the central character or the hero or the protagonist having cosmic importance, having great national. The setting of the poem is ample. The setting of the poem is vast, maybe worldwide. That means the setting of an epic is worldwide, it's vast. And the action in the epic involves superhumans. So the action involves Superman or superhuman deeds in battle. So there we will find the description, the fight, the bloodshed, the wars, the battles, and who are fighting in their battles. So it involves the superhumans having extraordinary power, potential, energy. So gods and other supernatural beings take also an active part in epics. So there are also gods and other supernatural beings. They also take part in epic. And an epic poem is a ceremonial performance. And what we find from the very beginning of an epic poem, so there is a ceremonial performance. There is something ceremony is going there. So something a divinely performance is going there in order to please gods and goddesses. So to the grandeur and to the formality of the heroic subject. That means there we find So the hero is a grand stature, and there we find the formality of the heroic subject. Another important characteristics of the epic is the invocation of the muse. Invocation of the muse. So what do we actually mean by invocation? Means abahana. So before we going to start something, we pray God. We seek their blessings. We need their blessings in order to carry out in my plan, to proceed in my plan. So in general epics, we also find the invocation of a muse. Muse means song, prayer. So calling upon the celestial aid, the divinely aid for poetic inspiration. Oh God, please bless me with those poetic inspiration so that I can sing about you. So invocation of a muse. So again I repeat, in the epic we find a central character and that is a hero. And hero is not an ordinary character. So belong to a supreme class, a very powerful, very energetic. And the setting of the poem is vast. Even the action takes place worldwide. The action involves not ordinary men, warriors or fighter. It involves superhuman. Even gods and goddesses take part in epic. And epic poem it's a ceremonial performance. We find that epic poem it's a ceremonial performance. And we also find the invocation of the muse. That means before the beginning of a particular epic, there we find prayers offering to God in order to seek the blessings from gods and goddesses. And there we also find epic similes, so beautiful comparison, so between different figures, that is known as the epic similes. There we will find words like as, like, such. So these words are used in order to compare something with other things. So when we find those words in epic, it is called epic simile. And we also find in epics the catalogs of warriors, ships, armaments. So different words that are similar in meaning to warriors means great warriors, fighters, heroes, brave men, ships, and armaments means different types of instruments that are used to fight. This epic also contains a third person narration. We do not find I or you, but it is always narrated in third person narration. It takes place in an area beyond the, it takes place in an era or in a particular period that is beyond the range of living memory. That means the incidents that have been described in a particular epic, so they take place in an era, in a particular period of time, so beyond the range of any living memory. It's beyond the range of our living memory. So when that incidents have taken place, it's beyond our memory. So these are the different characteristics of a particular epic. So why I am telling you the important characteristics of epic? Because I am going to focus on a particular subject that is written by Greek poet Homer, that is Iliad, and that is none other than an epic. So Iliad it's an epic poem. So as I told you that epic and its important characteristics, epic it's a poem. It's a narrative poem. It's a descriptive poem. It's very long and it includes the standard language in an elevated style. And the hero, the protagonist, is maybe a divinely figure, very courageous, very powerful. And the actions define the condition or the fate of a nation, of a tribe, of a culture, or of a civilization. So have focus on different epics, the names of different epics in the history of literature. So first, this Iliad, the Iliad and the Odyssey. So both these two epic poems are written by Homer, Greek poet Homer, who lived in between just 850 to 650 BCE. So before Christian era, 850 to 650 BCE. So Homer lived during that period of time. So there is no exact reference the actual lifespan of Homer, but it is considered that Homer lived in between this period of time, 1850 BCE up to 650 BCE. And the two greatest compositions of Greek poet Homer are the Iliad and Odyssey. So Iliad and Odyssey are none other than the identity of Homer. So the events of the Trojan War and King Odysseus' journey home from Troy. So in Iliad we find the events of a Trojan War, and in the Odyssey we find the King Odysseus and his return journey to home from Troy. Troy is the name of a battlefield. So the Iliad and Odyssey are the best example of a greatest epics the literature has ever produced. So both are the Iliad and Odyssey by Homer. So we have very popular name, that's the Mahabharata by Vyasadeva. So the Mahabharata, it's also a beautiful example of a great epic. So you might have learned the story of a Mahabharata, the characters of a Mahabharata, the incidents of a Mahabharata, and the vast area that it has taken place, the setting of this Mahabharata. That means it involves the vastness of this India. So Mahabharata, it's also written in the 18th or 19th century BCE, as it is considered that Mahabharata was written so from the 8th century to 9th century BCE. So it is also a beautiful example of an epic. So we have another epic, the Aeneid, Aeneid, the Aeneid. It's by Roman poet Virgil, Virgil. So it's written by Virgil. The Aeneid, it's written by Virgil. Then we have also the example of other epics like the Divine Comedy by Dante. The Divine Comedy, it's written by Dante. Even the Fairy Queen, it's written by Edmund Spenser in the Elizabethan age. So the Fairy Queen, it's written by Edmund Spenser. It's also the name of a great epic. And another epic, it's the Paradise Lost. Paradise Lost, it's written by John Milton. And there we find the biblical tale, the tales or the stories that are written or that are described in Bible. That the biblical tale of Adam and Eve. So two leading characters of Paradise Lost are Adam and Eve. And the fall of angel Satan. So Satan is the evil character in that Paradise Lost. And they are expelled from the Garden of Eden. And their expulsion, their outright from the Garden of Eden. So Adam and Eve, they are considered in the Bible. So they are considered as the first human being, Adam and Eve. And so they were living in heaven in the Garden of Eden, and how they fall to earth and human beings come after Adam and Eve. So here we focus on different names of different epics, the Iliad and Odyssey by Homer, the Mahabharata by Vyasadeva, the Aeneid by Roman poet Virgil, the Divine Comedy by Dante, the Fairy Queen by Edmund Spenser, and Paradise Lost by John Milton. So these are the best epics written ever. So if we focus on Homer's Iliad, so before going to directly the Iliad, so we first have focus on Homer. So Homer is considered as one of the best or one of the most celebrated and an outstanding even an exceptional poet of 6th century BC. Is the most celebrated, is an outstanding, and is an exceptional poet of the 6th century BCE. The Iliad and the Odyssey are the most influential works in the history of world literature. The Iliad and Odyssey, so both are written by Homer, and they are the most influential works in the history of world literature. That means, so Iliad and Odyssey are not taught to the students of a BEGC 102, to the learners of a BEGC 102. Not only to them, it is also taught worldwide. So the Iliad and Odyssey are the most influential works in the history of world literature. It is considered as the greatest poet that ever lived, and Homer is considered as the greatest poet that ever lived. So when we focus on as a poet, Homer as a poet, when we focus on his poems, that his poems have inspired many artists. So many artists, many writers, many philosophers, many musicians, many playwrights, many dramatists, many filmmakers, they have been inspired by the poems of Homer. That means the poems of Homer has inspired many. It has inspired the artists, writers, philosophers, musicians, playwrights, filmmakers, movie makers, dramatists. So this is the hallmark, this is the genius of Homer's quality. So in Homer's poetry, we find a perfect blend of mythology, history, culture, literature, archaeology at the heart of Homer's narrative. So Homer's this particular epic, we find that there is a blend of mixture of mythology, history, culture, literature, and archaeology, and all are at the heart of Homer's narration. That means Homer involves all these in his narration, in his description. So this is just about the very brief introduction to Homer. So once again I repeat that I have taught to you that my assignment is particularly based on that BEGC 102. Under this section we have 5 topics to be discussed, and the first topic is Homer's Iliad. So before going to directly Homer's Iliad, we finally focus on literature. Literature is compared with a vast tree. As a tree has different branches, so literature has different forms like novel, drama, poetry, short story, epic, etc. So when we focus on poetry, so as we focus on different forms of poetry, we find ode, ballad, sonnet, lyric, satire, and finally epic. And we are now going to focus on epic because the topic we are going to now read, it's none other than an epic itself. So as I have defined you that epic, it's a long narrative poem. Its subject matter is serious. It's told in a formal and elevated style. And the central character is a hero or a very semi-divinely figure on whose actions, that means on the hero's actions, depends the fate of a tribe, fate of a nation, fate of a civilization, fate of a culture, or the fate of a human race. That means the fate of human race depends on the actions of that noble character, the actions of that hero. And there are different particular characteristics of this epic. That means the hero is a divinely character. The hero is a cosmic figure. It is highly energetic, highly powerful. It is enriched with all sorts of good or divinely qualities. And the setting of this epic is vast, and it may be considered the setting takes place worldwide, and the action involves superhumans, their deeds in battlefields, their actions in battlefield. In most of the epic we find so there is a fight, and in the characters we find gods and other supernatural beings take place in the epic. So there we find also gods and goddesses and other supernatural characters in the epic. So it's a ceremonial performance. We find that it's a ceremonial performance. So in the beginning of a poem, we find so there is a something going on there, like a ceremony is going there, and that ceremony is done in favor of gods and goddesses to please them. And another important characteristic is the invocation of the muse. That means before the starting of an epic, so there is prayer, there is blessings offered to God. So there we also find description of a epic similes. Similes means it's a figure of speech that we use to compare something with the other. And when we compare something with the other, we find similarity between them. So in epic, we also find similes. And here they are known as epic similes. We find words like as, such, like, similarly, such as. So these words we find in particular epic, and they describe, they give comparison about different figures. So they are known as epic similes. And there we find catalogs of warriors, fighters, brave man, hero. We find such type of names plentifully in epic. Different ships, different armaments, different equipments that is used in warfare, used in battlefield. We also come across those terms. And if we focus on the narration, the narrative style, the descriptive style, it is all about the third person narration. And the narrator is an omniscient narrator. Omniscient means who knows everything. The narrator in an epic is an omniscient. And it takes place in an era. That means the incidents in an epic takes place in an era, in a particular period of time that is beyond the range of any living memory. That means if we want to focus on the incidents, the happenings, so our memory fails to remember those incidents because it has goes back to ages and ages, to generations and generations back. And then I will focus on the examples of different epics. The first, the Iliad and Odyssey written by Homer. Second, the Mahabharata, it's written by Vasudev. Third one, the Aeneid, written by Roman poet Virgil. Then the Divine Comedy, it's written by Dante. Then the Fairy Queen, it's written by Edmund Spenser. And then Paradise Lost, it is written by John Milton. So these are the most popular epics that the literature has ever produced. And when we finally come to Homer, so as I told you that Homer is a great Greek poet, and he lived in between a period of 850 to 650 BC. 850 to 650 BCE, before Christian era. So there is no specific time division of the lifespan of Homer, but it is in many books referred that Homer lived within the time period of 850 BCE to 650 BCE. So as I introduce all the learners to Homer, that Homer is considered as one of the most celebrated, as an outstanding and as an exceptional poet of the 6th century BC. The Iliad and Odyssey, the great epics written by Homer, so these are the most influential works in the history of world literature. That means these two epics, the Iliad and Odyssey, is taught all over the world, across the globe. And Homer is none other than the greatest poet that ever lived. If the time or if the history has witnessed greatest poet, that is none other than Homer himself. And when we focus on his poems have inspired many. His poems have inspired many artists, writers, philosophers, musicians, playwrights, movie makers. So all are inspired by the poems of Homer. And in his poems, especially in his epic, we find a blend of, a mixture of mythology, history, culture, literature, archaeology. So all are at the heart of Homer's narration. So this is all about a brief introduction to Homer, our most celebrated poet. So if we focus on the Homer's Iliad, so we find that this Homer's Iliad, it's obviously an epic poem, and this Iliad is written by Greek poet Homer, and it tells the story of the last year of the Trojan War. As Mahabharata depicts the story of wars on Kurukshetra, so this Iliad depicts the story of the last year of the Trojan War. Only the last year of the Trojan War, that is fought between the city of Troy and Greek. So just mark what is the subject matter of this epic Iliad is. So I just compare this Iliad with Mahabharata so that it will be easier for you to understand. As Mahabharata, it fought for 18 years, and the huge or the vast battlefield, it's the battlefield of Kurukshetra, where Kauravas and Pandavas are on both sides, even gods and goddesses. They also took part in that war. So similarly in Iliad, it's an epic poem. It's written by Greek poet Homer, and it tells the story of the last year of the Trojan War. So mark the last year of the Trojan War, and that Trojan War was fought between the city of Troy and the Greeks. So who are there on the both sides of this Trojan War? On one side we find the Greeks, and on the other side we find the city of Troy. So Trojan War was fought between the city of Troy and the Greeks. So this is very briefly the subject matter of Iliad. So if we go deeply into this particular poem Iliad, we find that the story of Iliad is centered on the wrath of Achilles. On the wrath of Achilles, wrath means anger. The destructive anger of Achilles. So who is here Achilles? Now Achilles is the great warrior of the Greeks. So Achilles fought in the side of Greeks, and he was a great Greek warrior. And the Iliad having other subtitle, that is the wrath of Achilles, that is the destructive anger of the great Greek hero Achilles. And there we find, subsequently we find quarrel, as in Mahabharata we find the quarrel between the Kauravas and Pandavas. So a subsequent quarrel here leading to the characters like the Achilles and Agamemnon. So here I want to introduce you that this war is not between the Greeks and the Trojans. It's a war between merit and might. Might means power and merit means intelligence. So it's a fight between intelligence and power. It's a fight between merit and might. It's not only the fight between the Trojans and the Greeks. And it focuses on just a small part of the Trojan War. The small part of the Trojan War means towards the last part of the Trojan War, means the last 1 year of the Trojan War. So Trojan War took 10 years. So the last 1 year of this Trojan War becomes the part of this Iliad. What is the subject matter of this Iliad? Now towards the last part of the Trojan War becomes the subject matter of this epic poem Iliad. And this Iliad shows, this particular poem shows, so how the poem confronts death. So as in Mahabharata we find, so what is there in Mahabharata? We find there are fight, death, bloodshed, killing. So all lead to only destruction. So here we find this poem confronts death, killing after killing, victim after victim, bereavement after bereavement. Bereavement means the grief in great extent, sorrow or unhappiness or sadness in great extent. So bereavement is the term that is used only to refer the emotion of a man who has faced his relative's death. That means it is the feeling, bereavement it is the feeling of, it is the deceased feeling. So bereavement after bereavement, and thus invites a clear sighted reflection on the value of life. So this particular epic focuses on, this poem confronts death, bloodshed, war, fight, struggle, killing after killing, victim after victim, bereavement after bereavement, or agony, or what we call despair, hopelessness, and thus invites a clear sighted reflection. And the ending is very much clear on the value of life. It teaches the value of life, the worth of life, the value of life, the essence of life, and the meaning of life. Epics always teach us certain moral values, and it teaches us the values of life. So if we focus on this Iliad, the only subject matter of Iliad is the last part of the Trojan War. As we are, when we go through this Iliad, we will enter into a battlefield. So when we go through the text of Iliad, we will confront a battlefield. And we are mere observers, we are mere readers. That we find on one side Greeks and on the other side the Trojans. And on the Greek side, so I want to remind you, I want to tell you that who are the leading characters and how they are related. So otherwise you cannot understand the text. If you don't have knowledge on the important or the leading characters and from which side they are fighting. So as I told you that this Iliad, this poem by Homer, the subject matter of this poem is the last part of the Trojan War. And when we read, when we enter into the text of this particular epic poem, we just confront war in front of us. We feel as if we are just standing on a war field, on a battlefield, and a fight is going on between the Greeks and the Trojans. And who are the leading characters? Who are the great warriors, kings, generals on the side of a Greek? Now, first, Achilles. Achilles is the main character, is the central character of this Iliad. Achilles is a great warrior, is a great fighter, and fighting on the side of a Greek. And then Agamemnon. 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 And he is the general of Achilles. So here two characters we are introduced here. So Achilles and Agamemnon. So both these two names begin with letter A. Achilles and Agamemnon. Achilles is the main character, central character, is a powerful ruler, is a powerful fighter, great warrior, and Agamemnon was his general. And Menelaus. Here we come across another important character is Menelaus, and Menelaus is the king of Sparta. Sparta, it's the name of a kingdom, and the king of that kingdom, Sparta, is Menelaus. So three characters: Achilles, Agamemnon, and Menelaus. Menelaus, king of Sparta. Then Helen. So now I can compare Helen with Draupadi. So if you compare Draupadi with Helen, we will find the same thing. So here Helen, so as Draupadi's comment to Duryodhan is considered as the cause of war on Kurukshetra. Only just Draupadi's that comment when just Duryodhan was entering into the great palace of the Pandavas. So he fell into the water. And there the comment of Draupadi caused anger in the mind of Duryodhan. And finally that led to the Kurukshetra war. So here Helen, the most important character in the side of Greeks is the Helen. The most beautiful woman in the world. So Helen is considered, in particular this epic Iliad, Helen is considered the most beautiful woman in the world. And Helen is none other than the wife of Menelaus. So mark the characters: Achilles, Agamemnon, both are great warrior and general. Then Menelaus, king of Sparta. Then his wife Helen is the most beautiful woman in the world. And he is taken by Trojans. Helen is captured by Trojans and is the cause of Trojan War. Helen is that means the capture of Helen by Trojans is the cause of Trojan War. And Odysseus, the king of Ithaca, is the Greek hero noted for his intelligence. So Odysseus is the king of Ithaca. So he is in the side of Greeks and he is noted, he is known for his intelligence, for his sharp wit, as Vidura in Mahabharata. Similarly, Odysseus in the part of Greeks. So another important character, Ajax the Great, is the second greatest Greek warrior. So first one is Achilles, and the second one is Ajax. Achilles and Ajax. So they are the two warriors, most powerful warriors from the side of a Greek. Then Agamemnon general, Menelaus and his wife Helen, and then Odysseus king of Ithaca. So these are from the side of a Greeks. So and from the side of a Trojans, the other side. So there are also certain characters we find. There we find also important warriors, kings, queens. So there we find Priam, Priam, king of Troy. Priam is the king of Troy. So Hecuba, Hecuba, Hecuba is the queen of Troy. So Priam and Hecuba are the king and queen of Troy. Hector is the son of Priam. So here on the side of Trojans we come across three characters: king, queen, and their son. King is Priam, queen is Hecuba, and their son is Hector. And Hector is the greatest of an Trojan. So from the Trojan side, Hector is considered as the greatest warrior, and he is killed by Achilles. Hector is killed by Achilles. Then another we character we find that Andromache, Andromache. Andromache is the Hector's wife. So here we find king and queen, his son and his son's wife. That is Hector and Hector's wife. Another important character that Paris, Paris, is a Trojan who took Hector from King Menelaus, who took Helen from the King Menelaus. So it is Paris who take Helen from the King Menelaus. So Paris, the role of Paris is that Paris captured Helen. And another character that is Aeneas, Aeneas, Aeneas is the greatest Trojan warrior after Hector. So from the side of the Greeks, we find two important warriors, Achilles and Ajax. And from the side of a Trojan, we find two important characters, that is Hector and Aeneas. Then king, queen, their son and their daughter-in-law. So these are not only the characters of Trojan War. So as we have witnessed in Mahabharata that Kauravas and Pandavas, they are not only the characters, even gods and goddesses, they have also taken part in that war. So here we also find some divinely characters, some spiritual characters, those who also take part in this Trojan War. So both gods and goddesses, they have taken part. Some taken part Greeks and some have taken part in the Trojans. So who are the Greek gods and goddesses, those who have fought in the favor of Greeks? It is so Poseidon, Poseidon. So Poseidon, then Hera and Athena. Poseidon, Hera and Athena. So these are three Greek gods that fight in the favor of Greeks. Those supported Greeks. And the other Greek gods and goddesses, those who supported Trojans, they are Apollo, Aphrodite, and Ares. Ares, Ares. Apollo, Aphrodite, and Ares. Apollo, Aphrodite, and Ares. So they are on the side of Trojan. And Poseidon, Hera, and Athena. Those Greek gods and goddesses are on the side of Greeks. So these are the important characters that who have taken part in this Trojan War and how they are related. So now I am just going to the very beginning of this Iliad, this particular poem. So when the story opens, we find that the Trojan War has been raging for 10 years. It has already fought for 10 years and we are just on the last year. And the Greeks are camped outside the walls of Troy. So the Greeks are now ready to attack and they are just hiding outside the walls of Troy. And there is an argument going between Agamemnon and Achilles. So first, we confront the characters of Greek warriors, Greek fighters, Agamemnon and Achilles. They are arguing over something. This is how the Iliad begins. So this is all about today's class. So I thank all the listeners. I thank all the learners, those who have joined. So once again, thank you very much for joining in my class. So I want to ask you one thing, that wherever you feel difficulty or a problem, or if you need further clarification in order to clarify your doubts, please feel free to ask me questions. So you can ask me questions. So taking the WhatsApp number, and you can share your questions or you can share your doubts or problems or difficulties through my this personal WhatsApp number. So you can note down my WhatsApp number. So 95564 10451. Again I repeat, 95564 10451. You can share your doubts, problems, difficulties. If you need further clarification, if you can seek my help, I am ready to help you. So thank you once again for joining the classes.
ହ୍ୟାଲୋ ଅଚ୍ୟୁତ ସାର୍,
ଆଜ୍ଞା sir.
ଆପଣଙ୍କର ବୋଧେ ଆସନ୍ତା କାଲି ନାହିଁ ପରଦିନ ଅଛି ନାଇଁ କି?
ଆଜ୍ଞା sir, ଦିନେ ଛାଡ଼ିକି sir ଅଛି.
Okay sir, we are very much thankful to you as well as our learners. We will just wind up the session. ଆମେ ଏଣ୍ଡ କରିବା
ଆଜ୍ଞା
ନା ସାର୍?
ଆଜ୍ଞା sir.
Thank you sir, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Any query regarding your uh, assignment, evaluation? Okay.